Ahoy, sailors! My name is Scott Nicholson, and I'm here to talk a little bit about a Virgin cruise that I just returned from. This was a 5-night cruise, and I was on the Valiant Lady. This cruise out of Miami. We visited the Dominican Republic. But my focus in this video is going to be to focus on the highlights and the lowlights, the things that I felt Virgin did better than anyone else, and the things that Virgin did not do as well. Now, this is all from my perspective, and that's why I wanted to make this video, because Virgin Cruise Lines is going to be different for different people. It isn't a cruise line that's trying to make everyone happy. They are targeting some specific audiences with their offerings. So I'm not going to cover the restaurants, I'm not going to cover the cabins, I'm not going to cover the stuff that's covered out there on lots of other videos. Instead, I'm going to just focus on specific aspects of the cruise that I felt stood out. And if you don't want to watch this whole video, I will just sum it up right here. If you like going to nightclubs, you will like Virgin Voyages. If you do not like going to nightclubs, you may not like Virgin Voyages. There's the too long didn't watch. But let's get right into it. So to start, I'm going to introduce myself, because that way, since everything in this video is subjective about my own tastes, it will help you understand if you feel you'd align with my interests or if you would not. So I've cruised a lot. I used to cruise with my spouse. He now is in a short-term care facility while I'm able to cruise. So I'm now cruising as a solo cruiser. I am heavily into board games and escape rooms. I like face-to-face gaming. I'm a professor and an academic. I like to garden and do pottery. I'm an introvert, so I live out in the country. I have a quieter lifestyle. I don't keep up with modern music since, say, the late 1980s when I graduated high school. That was about it for the last time I really kept up with what was going on with modern music. So that's a little bit about my tastes and who I am. One thing that's different on the Virgin Voyages and something I appreciated is the overall vibe of the ship and the crew and the shows. It's almost like Pan and Bacchus got together and decided to host a cruise. So it's very playful. So there's a lot of things that are set up for adult play. So whether that be flirtiness and sexuality being discussed, a lot of alcohol being tossed about, or dancing, there's a lot of that in the air and in the shows. Every show is using adult language and a lot of suggestions and flirtiness and that sort of thing. So you have to decide if that's what you like. I do enjoy that, I appreciate that, and I enjoyed that tone of the cruise quite a lot. Now, one of the things that a Virgin Voyage talks about is that they focus on no kids. That's a big deal. No kids are allowed on the cruise. And that was really attractive to me. I said, I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of patience for kids. So being on a cruise without kids sounds like a great thing. And it was. It was nice not to have screaming kids around. However, I then found those screaming kids were replaced many times with screaming adults. There were multiple times now that would happen in the bars and the bar areas, and that's fine, that happens there. But like during nice dining time in a nice restaurant, there might be multiple tables of groups of adults screaming and carrying on. And it would be, if they were kids, their parents would tell them, hey, be quiet. This is not the place for that sort of activity. And so now, as a solo cruiser, I was eating by myself, so therefore perhaps I was more affected by these large groups of people being quite noisy. But that was something that was distracting, and I thought, this actually isn't any better than having screaming kids to have screaming adults. So that's what I found. So talk about the embarkation process. So on a lot of cruises, you'll get a time, but that time is really just a suggestion. You show up anytime after they start boarding, doing general boarding, and you should be able to get on the boat. You might have to wait in line a little bit, but usually not. I've found that usually I just show up whenever I can get right on. The way Virgin did this was different, at least at the Miami port. So outside in the Florida heat, they had queues for each time block. So you board later than other cruises, so my boarding time was 3:15. As a note, if you decide to sail Virgin Voyages and you don't have anything to do in the port city during the day, I'd recommend finding a hotel that will allow you to have a late checkout, because they do board later. So when you get to the port area, they put you outside in a queue based on your boarding time. So I joined everyone else with a 3:15 boarding time. I got there about an hour early, about 2:15. The queues were all lined up every 15 minutes, another queue of people. There was nowhere to sit or relax or anything like that. You basically went and you stood in line outside. Now, they did let the queues in early, so my queue went in maybe about 2:45 for the 3:15 boarding time, but I couldn't get in until they had boarded all of the other, the 2:15, the 2:30, all those queues had to go in first before then the queue I was in could go in. Once I got into the facility, then it was very quick to get on board, and then the panic began. So, Virgin's setup for restaurants is different than most cruise lines. Their setup is that they have a variety, about 8 or so different restaurants instead of one big dining room or multiple dining rooms, and you book a time at the restaurants to eat. So a number of days before your cruise, they open a booking window online. You can go online and book your meals at that point, which I would recommend you do. If you don't, then what happens is as soon as you step on board and are able to connect to the ship's Wi-Fi, you are then able to book meals that you weren't able to book online earlier. They apparently hold a good chunk of their seating for getting on board. But what that means is all those people that got on board before you have already booked. It also means that a bunch of people are all using the app at the same time. And I found that to be a very frustrating experience because I knew that time was against me. I was trying to book places to eat for dinner, and the app kept crashing, and the app was slow. It was frustrating, but I knew that everyone else getting on board was doing the same thing. Because not only are you having to book your meals at this moment that you walk on the ship, you're also needing to book some of the shows. You're needing to book exercise classes. If there's fitness class you want to do, a lot of them are booked, or other activities, you are booking them all right there. In fact, the general recommendation is don't go to your room. As soon as you get on board, sit down somewhere, open up your app, and start to book out your cruise. And I found that stressful. That is not really how I wanted to start my cruise because I'd already been stressed out standing outside in the heat for a while. Then you get on board, then you immediately have to start booking everything. In a lot of ways, it's like what Disney has become. I actually was at Disney before going on my cruise. I had the same problem. At 7 a.m., Walt Disney World now, you have to get online and book a bunch of stuff for the day, and it had that same level of stress. And I didn't care for that. I found that I much prefer having a set time. I know every day I go to the dining room at whatever time, and I know I will have a table. I'm not going to have to either book or hopefully go by standby and because that is an option, is you can go and stand and hopefully get into the restaurant, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But I didn't like that. I didn't like that not knowing where I was going to go. Now, it was nice to have, there's no specialty dining on board. All the restaurants are included. So in some ways, it's kind of like they only have specialty dining restaurants because each one is very different. So you have a Mexican restaurant, you have an Italian restaurant, you have a steakhouse, you have your contemporary food. You're allowed to eat at each one of these once, so you do need to rotate between them. And then there is not a buffet, but more like a food court where they serve up plates of food of different kinds, so you can always go there if you need something. While I'm on the topic of restaurants, the food was beautiful. I will say from an Instagram perspective, they nailed it. Every dish was picturesque, but the taste really varied. There were quite a few dishes that I took a few bites of and I didn't want to eat any more of because they didn't taste good to me, or the texture was bad, and so it looked great, but I felt the food quality on Celebrity or Princess was on average much stronger. There were a few standout dishes, but there were also more than a few dishes that were really just not very good, but they all looked great. Now, one of the things that's different on a Virgin voyage is the vibe. So the vibe is very relaxed, and the idea is that it's kind of like a cool nightclub. So the things that people are wearing are more relaxed. Their attitude with you is more relaxed. And I found the service wasn't as good as I've had on other cruises. In fact, I'd say it was the worst service I've had on any cruise I've been on. And it might tie in with the vibe, but I have another theory. And I'll give you an example. So in the dining areas, for 8 of my meals, I had some kind of a meal where someone took my order and brought me food. And of those 8 meals, on 3 occasions, they didn't bring me something I ordered. That's a pretty high percentage. For if you think about if you've ever been on other cruises, you know that rarely happens. They're usually very attentive on bringing you things. And I have a suspicion that it actually might be the app that they're using. They don't write anything down. They put it all into a phone that they take your order from and then bring you your food. And I wonder if the same infrastructure that's supporting our apps that we're required to use and are frustrated by is also supporting the server's apps, and orders that they're putting in are not getting delivered. I don't know, but the having to re-ask for something multiple times throughout the cruise was quite surprising, and that was a bit of a disappointment. My room steward was quite good. She did a good job, although she wasn't able to supply things like a bathrobe or a tea kettle. And those are things that I usually can get on cruises, so that was a bit of a surprise. One of the real frustrations came on my last night. So because of my situation with my spouse at home, I was wearing a mask for the cruise. I was trying to stay away from other people. And when I was dining, in these dining rooms, the seating was much tighter than other cruises I've been on. And I think they do that because they want to encourage you to chat with each other. And so that's why they have a number of like these two-person seating booths that are all very close. I found that what I would do is go in and request a seat by the wall, because that way I had a little more space. I didn't have two neighbors. So my final night, I would get there and I would arrive at the opening time of the restaurant. That was when I booked, because then I knew I had the best chance of getting that. I requested a seat by the wall. They seated me in an area where no one else is seating, and as you can see, they seated me right in the middle of a whole bunch of other tables. And that was frustrating to have requested one thing and they said, okay, we can do that, and then they put you somewhere completely different. So yeah, the service wasn't as great, and I'm not sure why. And it might have just been my cruise, my experience, but I wasn't happy with that. Let's talk about the social staff. So things are organized differently on a Virgin cruise than on other cruises. Rather than have a cruise director and a team that run all the events, they have 12 happening staff members, and each person is aligned with a different kind of activity. So you have the foodie who runs all the food type events. You have the artist who runs art events. You have the gamer who coordinates all the game stuff. You have a magician. There's the diva, and so that's a drag queen. They do drag queen bingo and things like that. So the nice thing about that is each of these people are going to be running events that are related to their topic of interest, and you could get to know them. So I got to know the gamer because I participated in all the game shows and the trivia and things like that. So I got to know the artist because I did a few of the art activities, and that was nice. You could develop a relationship with the people who are in line with what you were looking for. That was good. One thing that was missing, I noticed from the first day, and then looking at the schedule, was any kind of an LGBT meetup. So that is something that I always go to on cruises, and most cruises have those. Have one on the first night. More and more cruises will schedule one for every night of the cruise so that you have a chance to meet up with other LGBT travelers. And I noticed that I didn't see one on the schedule, which surprised me because in general, the vibe of Virgin Voyages is very playful, very adult. I was surprised not to see that. And I asked one of the Happenings cruise staff. That's what I found in the past. If there was not an LGBT meetup on the schedule, I would ask the cruise director if they could add one, and they always have. In this case, I asked the Happening staff member, I don't see an LGBT meetup. Could we get one added? But one did not appear. That was a surprise. Another thing that happened, I noted, is there's a heavy focus on drinking on the cruise. There are not drink packages, so alcohol is a commodity on the board. So for example, in trivia, if you were the winning team on trivia, they would take you to a bar and buy everyone a round of drinks. That was your reward. And this came across in the events. So for example, there were painting activities, but they were all sip and paint activities, which cost $25, and you got alcohol while you painted. So there wasn't an opportunity to just go and do a painting class or something like that without buying alcohol and having to pay for it. So there was bingo. There's many times there is bingo on ships. In this case, it was Drag Queen Bingo. That was a lot of fun. You pay a high price to play, but then that's given back to the players as rewards. So I attended a session on Loteria, Mexican Bingo, and it cost $40 to play, and I figured, okay, so there's going to be cash prizes. And what I found out is It was not prizes. In fact, the prizes were like a pair of Virgin sunglasses. It was alcohol. So you were given mezcal tasting and margaritas, and it was about buying alcohol as part of that. And gaming. On the boat, they had the best board game collection I have ever seen on any ship, and that was impressive. The good games, Cosmic Encounter and Lords of Waterdeep, and games that you could really, if you were a significant board gamer, there were games that you could play that you didn't have to bring along with you. Gaming was also well supported during the day. As you can see, this space here is the social club. It's probably where I spent most of my time, and it was a space where you could play these board games. They ran trivia there. They ran other sort of game show events there. All the gaming stuff happened in here. During the day, this was well lit and well attended. What was interesting is this is the first cruise I've seen where the area designed for gaming was in the middle of the walkway of the ship. So as you can see, these tables here, this is where people would walk going from place to place. So you got to see people playing games as compared to like a place that has a gaming room. So many Princess lines, for example, have a card room or a gaming room where you can play. It's out of the way and you don't see what's going on. Other lines that don't have a specific place to play games, you have to figure out a place to play, maybe take over a table in a restaurant or a bar or something like that. But I thought it was interesting that as you walked through this ship, you saw people playing games. But it made it very clear that games are played here, and I really liked that. They also had an arcade with all the games set on free play. They were older games, but they were all set up. So the gaming support on this cruise was better than any cruise I've been on that wasn't a gaming-specific event. And part of that, I think, was because there was one of the happening staff, the gamer. That was their job, was to make it, they were knowledgeable about games and to make it a gaming-friendly space. And I met a number of people in the gaming space who spent their time there. It was a really nice way to find other gamers on board. So from that perspective, I really enjoyed the gaming area and the gaming support on the cruise. That was great. One of the things they did that was different is I never saw a map on board. Now, most lines, when you exit an elevator, somewhere around there would be a map of the floor that would show you where everything is. They didn't have maps. I couldn't even find a map on the app. Maybe I just couldn't find it because the app was challenging. One of the things this ship does differently is navigation. So for people to get around the ship, there's not a map, as you see. Instead, there's a list of the different venues and which way to go, more like street signs. Even if you go look at the elevator, there's no map. In theory, this can work out pretty well. You look at this and say, what do I need to do? Which way do I go? So let's say I need to go to the draft house where there was an event last night. I needed to get there. So I find the thing, draft house, this way. So I go this way. And then that's going to take you to another sign that will tell you where to go. And draft house is not on there at all. And I found this very frustrating trying to find things. You can look at this sign. You can see there's no draft house. And so finally I'm wandering around saying, well, where do I go? And we have this, which tells me, okay, it's not here. So I guess it's out here. And then you can continue to look. And this is the draft house here. There's no sign. There's nothing that tells you this is the draft house. There we go. If you look on the back wall, the dark blue on black says draft house. Ugh. Give me a map. I can do it with a map. The big night for the show is Scarlet Night. So Scarlet Night, they encourage everyone to wear red. They have stations where you can get glitter and glam. As you can see, I decided to let them glitter up my beard. We had a good time with that. And during this evening, the ship transforms. Things change, lighting changes, the ship becomes red, tentacles appear everywhere. It's almost like it felt like at times that we were going to be summoning the Great Cthulhu, as you can see. It had that sensation to it. The best way I would describe Scarlet Night is like immersive theater. If you've ever been to an immersive theater event where you wander around a large space, see little shows, little vignettes are going on, things are happening, things are changing, and it's up to you to explore the space and see what's going on. And then it all ends with announcements saying everyone up to the deck, up to the top, and this big pool party where then people start dancing in the pool. They do warn you ahead of time. You might want to wear clothes that you can get wet because they start splashing, and then people started jumping in, and it was a pretty crazy event. It was this culmination of everything going on here, and that was fun. That was exciting. The music was quite loud. I had a room that was directly below the pool deck, and after I left the event and was heading back to my room, the whole hallway was just shaking with the bass of the music. In fact, so much so that one of the panels in my ceiling fell loose, and they had to come in and fix it from the bass shaking. Now, thankfully, that was the only night that I had that issue with sound. The other nights were not a problem, but I've heard rooms that are around the clubs that are in the middle of the ship can have that problem with sound on a regular basis. And I think that's going to bring me to my biggest problem with the ship, and that was the noise level. So there was club music playing all the time. One of the things that I like to do on cruises is early in the morning, I get up 6 or 7 a.m., I go and get a coffee or a tea. I like to sit in a quiet space. I like to watch the water, or if we're coming into a port, I like to watch us coming into the port. It's interesting to see. A lot of people are not up at that point, so it's a nice quiet time. And that was not available on the Virgin Voyage because everywhere you went, it was just club music. And I was talking about this to a friend, and he said, well, Scott, you know Virgin is a record company. And that was like the click. It's like, oh yeah, okay. So there was like a record store on board, tattoo parlor on board, things like that. But this tie-in with music was strong. And that kind of overwhelmed me after a while. I, as an introvert, someone that doesn't like club music, I don't like a club scene, I found the only quiet place I had was in my room or on my balcony. Now, what have I enjoyed the most about this Virgin Voyages boat? It's actually this hammock. This hammock, there's a hammock on balcony rooms, and I have spent more time on this hammock than anywhere else on this boat. It is very comfortable to just sit and swing and look out at the ocean. You can sit and have your feet down like this. You can lie all the way down like that. And then when you lie down, you can grab the top and put it up like so. And put your head back like that. And then you can just sort of lie there and watch the world go by. I found when it was, when the boat was rocky, this continued to sway, and that was very soothing. I saw a whale sitting in this, just right off of the balcony here. I saw a whale breach, that was nice. And most importantly, it was quiet most of the time. It was away from that club noise and that constant music. And so this was my refuge, my place to get away was this hammock. So for me, this was the best part of the entire voyage. So to summarize, the cruise is basically a floating nightclub. And if the idea of spending a week in a nightclub is something that's appealing or interesting to you, the Virgin will be a great match for you. If the thought of spending a week in a nightclub is something that you're like, I would rather go to the dentist, then Virgin might not be a good match for your interests. In some ways, I would compare Virgin Voyages to a Disney cruise. Both of them lean in very heavily into what they're trying to accomplish. In a Disney cruise, there's Disney music always playing. There's Disney magic always around you. You really can't escape the Disney vibe. And so if the thought of spending a week at a Disney park is appealing to you, then a Disney cruise would be a good match for you. But if the thought of spending a week living in a Disney park is like, no way, then you wouldn't want to go on a Disney cruise because your resources you're paying for the cruise are supporting that level of magic. And the same thing with Virgin. If the thought of living in a nightclub for a week is appealing to you, go for it. But know that your resources are going to support those kind of activities in a lot of that world. And so if that's not a good match for you, then you'll probably want to rethink going on a Virgin Voyage. I won't be going on another one. I like a more serene cruise. I like something where I'm not worried about where I'm going to eat. I like things a little bit more calm and relaxing. That's what I'm looking for on a cruise. So I'm going to go back. Princess and Celebrity are probably my two favorite lines, and I will return to those cruises. So maybe I'll see you on board. If I do, feel free to ask for a game. I'll always have some games with me. Until then, well, ahoy, sailors, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.